All right, good morning. So yesterday we learned the Gemara, which told us that we are to wash our hands twice at the Seder, once before Karpas, and we dip the first time. And we explained this is because of the idea of impurity, and the entire mitzvah to wash our hands nowadays is an observance or remembrance of the observance of purity that would have existed in temple times. And the two components of the commandment, the rabbinic commandment to wash our hands, is number one, before bread, number two, before you eat something with wet fingers. So we discussed that. You're dipping the karpas. You may get your fingers wet. You don't have to dip all the way. Nonetheless, you should still wash for that. And then we learned you got to wash again, even though in theory, when you eat bread, for example, you don't have to wash before every slice. You wash once at the beginning of your meal, and it covers your whole meal. So why not wash the beginning of the Seder and let it cover for the matzah and the second dipping by the mother as well? And we explained, because you're reading the Haggadah and parts of Hallel. In between, you're distracted. Now with that, we really concluded two items in the 15 steps of the Seder, which is Karpas and Yachatz. Right? We learned about Karpas earlier in the Gemara, but we didn't conclude it, and therefore we never learned the Shulchan Aruch about it. But now that we were told, before Karpas, you got to wash your hands, now we have the full picture of Karpas. Right? So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to learn the halachas of Karpas. And immediately following the halachas of Karpas is going to be the halacha that you have to wash your hands before Karpas, because that's where it comes from. That's what the Gemara describes it, right? Because you're dipping, therefore you have to wash before. And then from there, we'll go to the Rebbe's Haggadah on Orchatz and Karpas, washing and Karpas, which is the two items we're learning now. And then from there, we'll go to the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, where he discusses the washing the second time, where there he says, even though you washed once, you have to wash a second time. We'll learn that. And then from there, we'll go back to the Gemara itself. So we still got a ways to get back to the Gemara. We'll be looking at Shulchan Aruch and Rebbe's Haggadah. So, yeah.
Question. Let's see. When you go, before you do the Seder, you go to the mikveh, you have to wash again?
Yeah, you still have to wash your hands.
Okay.
When you go to mikveh any day, you have to wash your hands when you're done.
Yeah.
You always wash your hands after mikveh, but this is unrelated. It's not to wash before you by the Seder. There is discussion in halacha about if you don't have a cup by which to wash hands, if you can dip your hands into a mikveh to count for that. There's discussion about that, about what kind of, it has to be a kosher mikveh, whatever, the whole discussion. Okay, we'll leave that alone for now.
Maybe we heard in snow.
Depending on the situation, you can even use the snow. Yeah, the laws of washing your hands are detailed and intricate. It's a more Masechta Brachos.
It's funny, you said after you take mikveh, you have to wash your hand.
Yeah.
This time, if you go for the Seder, you can put your hand in the mikveh?
I'm not answering the question, but the answer is we're leaving it alone. Okay. Because the halachas over there are too complicated to cover everything.
It's very complex.
Sorry? There's a lot of detail to the washing of the hands, the preparation of washing your hands, the act of washing, what you do after you wash. All the details are very, very detailed.
Beyond the scope of.
Be'ezer Hashem, when we share a meal next time for Hamotzi, I can walk you through what I do and show you all the details very specifically. So do a little demonstration. Maybe we should do it for everybody. Demonstration of, it's not all the halachas, it's all the details and the conclusions of the halachas. What you would see if we did such a demonstration, but maybe for another time. Okay.
Last question. If somebody has no arms, somebody should wash for him. How we can do it?
Why would no.
To wash if he has no hand?
No. Okay. So we're looking now at chapter 473. We already started learning some of the halachas of chapter 473. That's 475. This is 473. We already learned some of the halachas of 473 because 473, as it says there, is the laws of the first cup until the second cup. So it's Kadesh, Orchas, Karpas, Yachad, and Magid. We learned a lot of the halachas of Kadesh already, right? We learned the laws of setting the Seder plate, which is also in this part here. What else did we learn from this section? I think those are the only two things we learned from this section.
The cups, first and second cups.
We learned a little bit about the Kiddush, right? The Kiddush.
Right.
About
The leaning.
The leaning. The leaning is a different chapter, not 473. That was a different chapter about leaning.
Okay.
And we learned about the setting the Seder plate here. And something else we learned in this halacha, which was,
You didn't do Haros.
I don't remember. Oh, the bracha, whether or not you make a bracha at the
Right,
second
right.
cup.
Right, about the cups, yeah.
Oh, that's what you meant. Whether or not
That's
you
what
make
I
a second
meant.
bracha at the cup, yes. Okay, so now in this process between the first and second cup comes orchatz and karpas. So the way the Shulchan Aruch is going to tell us is, first of all, you have to do karpas. And because you're doing karpas, therefore you have to do orchatz before. Right?
What's
Because
the translation of orchatz?
and you shall wash.
Okay, thank you.
Orchatz and you shall wash. Karpas is the name of the vegetable.
Right.
Okay. So halacha yudalid, halacha 14 of chapter 473. You see, it's halacha 14. So this is halacha 1. Turn a few pages, you'll see halacha 14. Halacha yudalid. Achar sheshasa. After one drinks, kois yishoin, the first cup, so you finish kaddish. Sarach kol echad ve'echad, each and every one is required. Lechal ma'at, to eat a little bit. Yerakos of vegetable, betibul, in such a manner that he dips. That's the halach. That's the essence of karpas. What's the essence of karpas? To eat a vegetable in some dip. The details of what kind of vegetable and how much you should eat and what you should dip into is what we're about to learn.
Okay.
But the essence of it is to eat a vegetable that's dipped. Dahainu, this means to say, she'it belenu, he should dip this vegetable, b'chaymetz in vinegar, or b'meimelach, or in salt water, or b'shar minei tibulim, or in any other dip, as long as you're doing a dip. Okay, we're going to learn from the Rebbe's Haggadah that maybe when it comes in the Siddur, the Alter Rebbe switches and says only vinegar and salt. We'll get to that. But as far as the halacha goes, vinegar, salt water, or any other dip. And if he doesn't have any dipped, you dip it into your charaisis, because you have to do a dipping. Right? This dipping in the charaisis emerges from our Gemara.
Yeah.
Because our Gemara talked about, at least in our context yesterday, that the first washing was because of the dip, because you have to offset the maror, because if the only vegetable you have is maror, you can use maror. And then you have to use charaisis to offset the kappa, the danger of maror, either the worm or the poison, right? So the implication of yesterday's Gemara was that in theory, even your first dipping could be a maror and charaisis. And then we had a whole question about whether you make the bracha of maror or not, whether mitzvahs require intent, right? Because if mitzvahs don't require intent, then you automatically fulfill your mitzvah by the first dipping, and then you shouldn't be dipping a second time, and you should make the bracha the first time. Yeah, we learned about that. But in theory, at least, we know that you could even use your charaisis for the first dip if that's all that's available to you. Okay, again, when we get to the Rebbe Haggadah, we'll see that maybe it's not so simple. Just like you use the Gemara for the first dip, that's correct.
For the dipping.
Correct. In theory, your first dip could be even maror. We learned that in the Gemara that all you have is the chasa. Use the chasa.
Yeah.
The chazeres, I'm sorry, the chasa, the chazeres, yeah, that's correct. And our Gemara yesterday talked about, in the context of the first dipping, that you're dipping to offset the
poison,
which was in the chazeres. In the chazeres, at least, I'm sorry. At least that was the implication. Pulling up the Gemara right now.
Poison in the
chazeres. Sort of l'shkoya b'chazeres. You got to put it into the chazeres to offset either the poison or the worm, the kappa. The Gemara said that the danger involved with eating the maror because it has kappa in it. And we had two different versions of what kappa was, either
a worm
or some kind of poison, some toxin. Yeah. Okay. Continuing. So you have to do a dipping. A vegetable into a dip, whatever you got. Thank you. Either salt water, vinegar, any other dip, and even if all you have left is charaisis, dip it in the charaisis. Okay, we're going to see it when the Rebbe comes to the Rebbe's Haggadah. This might change, but at least for now, this is what we have.
Yeah, I would think, just thinking out loud, that maybe dipping in the charaisis may not raise curiosity among them.
That's what we're doing right now. Yeah.
Yeah.
Why was this established? To elicit curiosity from the children. Shiyiru, the children will observe, a change. Number one, that we're eating vegetables dipped. It's not the way to eat them. Before you wash and eat bread, the rest of the year. Usually, throughout the year, you wash, and then you have the rest of your food, including your dipped vegetables. But here we're doing dip vegetables before we eat. Thus, there's a raise of curiosity. and they will ask in regard to this change. That's the point here. Let's look at.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what the change was.
Now we're eating it before we wash. Usually, the bread is the first thing you eat. Your meal is usually the first thing you eat.
Don't we wash before we eat the?
No, I'm saying I meant wash for hamaitzi.
Oh, okay.
I'm sorry. Yes, you're right. You do wash. Yes, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
I didn't understand.
I'm sorry. Yes. Usually we eat dip vegetable only after we've eaten hamaitzi.
Okay.
After we wash and eat hamaitzi. Yes, I'm sorry. Correct. Okay, look at footnote 86.
We go to 86 now.
Footnote 86. Footnotes, which reads, the source for this is Psachim 114b, our Gemara. This point is also mentioned in 475:22, which I think we learned already. Right, 475:22. We're on 473. No, we didn't do 475 yet, which we will do. Okay, the Alter Rebbe, sorry, 473 we are. The Alter Rebbe proceeds to mention two deviations from the norm that will arouse the children's curiosity. A, that the vegetables are being eaten before the meal, meaning before you eat hamaitzi. B, that they are being eaten after being dipped. This reflects the difference in the wording used by Rashi and the Torah to describe how the vegetables should be eaten. Okay? So that's, if you want to get very specific as to what the curiosity is. Okay, back to the main text. Now, why is it so important to raise a curiosity from the children? Because Shamiras Haggadah, you have a place there? Yeah. Shamiras Haggadah, because the recitation of the Haggadah, mitzvah, the mitzvah is la'amra, that it should be said, derech teshuva, in such a way that we are responding to question. Al sheila shishalu, on questions that were asked. Shenemar, the verse reads, ki yisholcha bincha, when your child will ask, etc. V'amarta lebincha, and you shall tell your child, avodah bayinu, we were slaves. So because we're about to read the Haggadah, we're about to fulfill the mitzvah of retelling the story of the Exodus. Right? If you want to understand the flow of the Haggadah, which we spoke about last year, we did this in depth, the Seder, the order of the Haggadah. But if you want to just look at this, you have the obligation to make Kiddush like every Friday night, like every Yom Tov. You got to start off with Kiddush. Plus, you have in that Kiddush cup number 1 of your 4 cups of wine. Okay. The next mitzvah on you is to retell the story. Now, when we're telling the story, the Torah says, your child will ask. Okay, so you got to do something before you tell the story to make your kid ask the question. Right? So therefore we dip. And that raises the curiosity. Now, since you're dipping, you got to wash. So really the mitzvah is Kadesh and then Magid. But in order to do Magid properly, you got to have Karpas. Which is to raise curiosity. And in order to do Karpas properly, because you're dipping, you got to wash. You got to orchatz.
Like, no mitzvah to wear a 4-cornered garment. But if you do, you have to tie it.
Yeah, that's right. So it's all
it's
correct.
Because it's
that's correct. So Karpas is in fulfillment of the mitzvah to retell the story, because the story has to be told in response to a question. So you have to do something to engage, to elicit questions. Okay. Yeah.
If you put gloves, you have to wash also.
Okay. The answer is no, but we're not going. Again, we're not doing the laws of washing now.
No, you're talking about washing.
So I'm telling you, we're not going to do the laws of details of washing. We're not doing now because that's too much. But the answer would be, in theory, no. Okay. The kivon shaychilazu, because this eating einoi ella is for no other purpose other than latmias atinoik, is to elicit curiosity from children. Lefichach, therefore, ein tzarich kazayis. You don't need to have a full portion of eating. Kishar achila shebetorah, like all other required eatings of the Torah, she'ein in a kras achila, the Torah does not consider an eating the pachas bekazayis less than a kazayis. So explain. Every legal entity, secular law is true as well. You have to have parameters to qualify the fulfillment of that legal thing, right? You have to check all the boxes, right? We know this here in Quebec from all our bureaucrats. They're very busy with checking boxes, right? This is the way it is. Because there's a legal requirement and you start to explain to them. Doesn't matter, explain until tomorrow. The law is that this is how it fits. You have to meet the threshold. You have to meet the threshold. So Torah says to eat marar, eat matzah, eat the carbon on the base of mikdash. Whenever the Torah says to eat something, what qualifies eating? Taking a crumb qualifies as eating? That's not eating. So you have to have a minimum measurement to make something qualify as a legal eating.
Mhm.
So a legal eating is when it's a kazayas, when it's at least the volume of an olive. Okay. Now here, you're not essentially being told thou shalt eat a vegetable. No mitzvah. The mitzvah is to raise curiosity in fulfillment of the other mitzvah, which is to tell the story. And therefore, you aren't required to do
Not
a
eating.
legal eating. You just do enough to elicit the question. And therefore, even a tiny drop, even a little amount, is enough to raise the curiosity. And therefore, as we'll learn, our custom actually is to eat dafka specifically less than a kazayas. And that way we're not responsible to make a after bracha. So we actually dafka don't eat a kazayas, and that way we don't have the issue of an after bracha. Even though in theory your after bracha could be covered by the after bracha you do at the end of the meal, nonetheless, because of the space the time between it, we don't want to run into any issues. So we actually avoid eating a full kazayas. Don't gobble that whole potato, because we want to avoid the question of whether we have to make the bracha. We'll get to that when we get to the Rebbe Zagada. Yeah, sorry, you want to say something?
No, just thinking. No.
Okay. Now, what happens if I'm sitting alone? I'm running the Seder alone. It's COVID, God forbid. And there's no one around. There's no kids. So do I have to have karpas? The whole point is to get the questions. Says the Alter Rebbe in the parentheses. Even when there's someone who's sitting alone as he conducts his own Seder, and he has no children present to ask him any questions. Nonetheless, one is still required to dip. Because our sages do not make distinctions. Once they institute a practice for Jews, even if the reason only applies to a certain segment of Jews, once they enact that obligation, the obligation sticks, and that's it. Thank you. My face says it's spring, and the window says it's winter. Little contradictions going on.
It's no time
Yeah.
of Pesach now.
Anyway. Tezayim. The Noyagin, it is our custom, lachzor, to seek out, yorek, a certain vegetable, hanikra karpas, that's called karpas. Yeah? And obviously it's because of this custom, that's why it's identified as karpas. In Yiddish, this karpas is called ipach. That is. Let's look in footnote 94. There are different opinions as to which vegetable is being referred to. What exactly is this ipach in Yiddish or karpas in Hebrew? Right, so 94 says, there are different opinions as to which vegetable is being referred to. Based on Talmud Yerushalmi Shvius 9.1, some authorities maintain that the intent is parsley. Many indeed have a custom to dip parsley. Others identify it as coriander, while still others maintain it as a vegetable, celery. Many people actually use parsley and many use celery for this reason. The Lubavitch custom actually is to dip onions or potatoes in salt water. See footnote 97, subsection 17 below. So we'll have to keep in mind to look at footnote 97. Okay. Why? Why karpas? Because the word karpas is comprised of the letters that make up the following words. Samach perach. Take the word karpas, kof, resh, pe, samach, rearrange the letters, and you have the words samach perach. Samach is the numerical value of 60, and perach is the word used in Torah to describe back-breaking labor. So it would be 60 back-breaking labor. Kalaymar, what we're saying is, Shishim Riboy, there were 60,000 Jews of Duavadas Perach who were subject to back-breaking labor. So Karpas alludes to the 60,000 Jews, the word Karpas alludes to the 60,000 Jews who had back-breaking labor. Okay. The name like Karpas, if you cannot find this unique Karpas vegetable, Yikach Yarak Acher, he should take another vegetable, Me'ezim in Yarak Sheyirtze, from whatever vegetable he desires. That was the emergent, that's what we got from our Gemara, right? Right? The Gemara said any vegetable, right? Uvavad, so long as it should not be the kind of vegetable that you could fulfill the mitzvah of marar. What's the reason? Maybe we should know this right from our Gemara. Why shouldn't you use marar for your karpas? Even though the Gemara said you could, in theory. Why don't we? Because you run into the whole machlekes with the bracha of achelas marar. If you're of the opinion that it doesn't require intent, you fulfilled your mitzvah, and you have this issue,
Right.
and therefore avoid that. Yeah. Because if he's now going to eat one of the vegetables with which you are allowed to fulfill the mitzvah of marar, he cannot later make the bracha thanking Hashem for the mitzvah of marar, even because he already ate it earlier. Right? That's footnote 59 tells us to look at our Gemara. Yeah. Even though our Gemara oscillated back and forth about it, in the end, we don't want to run into the issue and therefore avoid that vegetable.
Because it could be under the argument that you don't need intent.
That's a good question. Oh, so
Right?
that's right. So there are many. Okay, so that's a good point, because this is the whole discussion about when we looked at Gemara. Then we touched about it a little bit about when exactly we say mitzvahs. When do we say that mitzvahs don't require intent, and when do we say that mitzvahs do require intent? As far as the Seder night goes, even those that are of the view. Sorry, when it comes to matzah, for example, because matzah you physically enjoy it, that itself constitutes intent. Even for those who say that, because there's an editing component, therefore you because you're engaged in the eating to the extent that you actually physically enjoy it, that kind of offsets the requirement to need intent. There's a whole discussion as to how that works.
Okay.
But this is what emerges from Rambam for sure and others. Conversely, when it comes to marar, for example, even the views that say that mitzvahs require intent, many of them will say that when it comes to a rabbinic mitzvah, you don't require intent. And because today marar is a rabbinic mitzvah, you even according to those opinions, you might end up fulfilling your mitzvah inadvertently by eating the marar earlier.
Right. And therefore, you can't say a bracha later.
And therefore, if you had the marar first time around, you won't be able to make the bracha later on. Correct. Okay. Right? We'll back to our Gemara for a second. It was where was it? It was in Kufir Dal and Beis. Yeah, the Gemara concluded. The halacha follows of Chizda. The halacha follows of Chizda, who said you cannot make the second bracha again of al achilas marar. And the Gemara concludes, Rav Acha Breder Rava Mahader Ashar Yerakis, Rav Acha son of Rava would go find other vegetables, to avoid the dispute.
You read this yesterday?
No, way back when we looked at
When we was that yesterday?
right. This was when we're going back to the Gemara about Karpas, which we
Yeah.
discussed with it.
Wow.
Right? Because the Gemara took a detour to talk about Korach for whatever reason, and now it came back to Orchat's Karpas, which is why we kind of took the detour with the Gemara all the way down to the Shulchan commentary, which took us for 2 weeks. Right. Okay.
If you say it without eating, is bracha levatala.
Yeah. Okay. Yud Zayin. We have a few more minutes. Or we have to stop here.
Yud Zayin.
Maybe we stop here and continue tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. So we'll stop here and continue tomorrow, God willing.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Good day. And,
Thank you very much.
be safe.
Peace. Yeah. Drive safely, especially if you
drive
change your tires
safely.
back to the summer tires. Be very careful.
Oh, yeah.
Yesterday, the truck coming through.
Yeah. Many people change their tires already. You got to be careful.
Yeah.
Have a good day, Eden.
Thank you.